You want the raw truth? Avoidants never expect you to stay silent this long. They bank on your weakness. They gamble on your craving for reassurance. They depend on the fact that at some point, you'll fold, you'll text, you'll reach out first. You'll give them the confirmation that even when they reject you, you're still orbiting around their world. That's their comfort zone, that's their cycle, and it's the script they've used with people their whole life. But here you are, silent, and that silence, it isn't just empty air. It's disruption. It's chaos in their carefully controlled narrative. It's you becoming unpredictable, and nothing shakes an avoidant harder than realizing they can't predict, control, or anticipate you anymore. Let's be real. Silence scares them more than confrontation. Why? Because confrontation gives them fuel. If you argue, plead, or explain yourself, they can feel justified in pulling away. They can point at you and say, "See, you're too much." But when you say nothing, when you disappear into stillness, they have no ammo, no excuse, just themselves. And avoidants don't know what to do when all that's left is them. And listen, I'm not here to pacify you. I'm not here to hand you some watered-down, "Don't worry, they'll come back" bedtime story. This channel isn't about cliches. This is about reality, unapologetic, sometimes uncomfortable reality. And the reality is this: your silence is doing things to them that you can't even see yet. First, let me thank you, seriously, for sticking with me through this Avoidant X series, volume after volume. We've been breaking down their patterns, their psychology, their every move. If you've made it here, I already know one thing about you. You're not just casually scrolling for quick dopamine. You're invested in transformation. And that's why this video is different. Because today, we're not just looking at what avoidants do. We're peeling back the mask and exposing what they actually feel. And trust me, feelings are the battlefield avoidants have spent their whole lives running from. But before we dive into the 7 things they feel when your silence stretches longer than they ever expected, I want you to make me one promise. Promise that you won't skip. Promise that you won't scroll. Promise that you'll sit through this entire video like it's the one moment in your week where everything else can wait. Why? Because if you actually stay with me to the end, this won't just help you understand them. It will change the way you understand yourself. This is more than content. This is training. This is armor. This is the kind of perspective shift that makes you magnetic. Not because you're playing games, but because you're mastering yourself. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Your silence. That's freedom. It's you stepping out of the cage they built in your mind. It's you finally realizing you can't control them, but you can control you. And that control, that discipline, it's magnetic. See, avoidants live on patterns. Push, pull, hot, cold, reject, then reel you back. It's the script they've run for years. But silence longer than they anticipated. That destroys the script. It creates cognitive dissonance, the psychological tension that happens when someone's expectations clash with reality. And that tension, it eats at them. It keeps them up at night. It forces them to ask questions they've avoided for years. Why haven't they reached out yet? Have I lost control here? Wait, do they not need me anymore? Do you understand how powerful those questions are? For someone who's built their entire identity on control and distance, those questions feel like earthquakes. And that's why I'm telling you, the silence you're holding right now is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's not giving up. It's one of the most disciplined, high-value moves you can make. Yes, I know what it feels like on your side. You wake up, no texts, no missed calls, no "I miss you," just silence. And that silence, it whispers in your ear, maybe I should reach out, maybe I should break this, maybe this isn't working. But every single time you resist that urge, you're not just resisting them, You're reprogramming yourself. You're proving to your nervous system that you can survive without their crumbs. You're proving to yourself that you're not dependent. And that shift, that's where real confidence is born. Marcus Aurelius said it best: the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Think about that. They expect you to act on impulse. They expect you to crack. They expect you to chase. But when you don't, you're already ahead, not because you're punishing them, but because you're becoming something far more dangerous: self-sufficient. And here's the paradox. They don't admit it, but that self-sufficiency, it pulls them in. Because the truth is, avoidants don't hate intimacy. They fear it. And when you stay silent long enough, when you refuse to reset the cycle, their fear starts to shift. It's no longer, "I'm afraid of being trapped by intimacy." It becomes, "I'm afraid of losing them completely." And that shift is everything. But let's bring this back to you. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about winning them back. This is about winning yourself back. About proving to yourself that you don't need to fold just to feel worthy. About realizing that silence isn't a void, it's a forge. A forge where you burn away weakness and rebuild strength. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels empty. But emptiness is a teacher. Pain is a teacher. This is where you learn that your value was never supposed to be measured by how quickly someone responds to your text. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, in the comments, declare it. My silence is my power. That's the mantra. That's the declaration. That's the line in the sand that says, I refuse to play small. I refuse to chase validation. I refuse to be predictable. Type it. Anchor it. Claim it. Because silence isn't passive. It's active. It's deliberate. It's the exact training ground that's going to shape you into someone untouchable, magnetic, undeniable. So hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notifications, not because it helps me, but because it helps you. Because the videos coming next aren't just going to break down avoidant psychology. They're going to build you. They're going to give you frameworks for relationships, for discipline, for healing, for life itself. This is your reset button, your edge, your shift. And if you commit to watching until the end, without skipping, without scrolling, without running from the discomfort, you will walk away with something most people never find: peace. Peace that doesn't depend on their next text. Peace that doesn't collapse when they vanish again. Peace that makes you unshakable. So lean in, lock in. Because the 7 things I'm about to reveal are not just going to expose their hidden feelings, they're going to expose your hidden strength. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Let's begin. Stay focused. Thing number 1, confusion turns into restlessness. Here's what happens first. The moment your silence stretches longer than they accounted for, confusion sets in. At first, they don't panic. They tell themselves a story. Oh, they're just busy. They'll break eventually. They rely on the memory of your old patterns, the times when you always reached out, always filled the gap, always broke first. That's the you they expect. But here's the problem. This time you're not following the script. And avoidants hate when the script breaks. Silence for them isn't just absence, it's disruption, it's unpredictability. And avoidants live for predictability because it gives them control. They thrive when they know the loop. They pull back, you chase. They retreat again, you fold again. It's a cycle that props up their ego and shields them from vulnerability. But when you stop playing, when your silence stretches beyond what they can explain away, that's when confusion mutates into restlessness. Let me paint it for you. They check their phone more often than usual, not because they miss you in the way you might imagine, but because your silence isn't aligning with their expectations. They tell themselves, it's been long enough, they should have cracked by now. But nothing comes, no message, no like, no breadcrumb from you, and suddenly they're restless, pacing inside their own head. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. When reality doesn't match expectation, the human brain scrambles to resolve it. And avoidance? They feel it harder than most, because they've built their entire identity around the assumption that they can keep distance and you'll do the chasing. And here's the kicker, they'll never admit it. Outwardly, they may act like everything's fine. They'll post their selfies, go out with friends, act carefree. But internally, they're restless, they're unsettled, because silence is a mirror, and for the first time, that mirror isn't reflecting back the validation they were counting on. Let's get brutally honest here. They're not restless because they suddenly realize your worth. Not yet. That comes later. They're restless because the rhythm they depend on for emotional stability is breaking down. You've thrown a wrench into the cycle. It's like music. Imagine hearing a song you know by heart and suddenly the beat skips. Your brain jolts. It doesn't feel right. That's what your silence does. It interrupts their emotional playlist, and the longer it goes, the more restless they become. And here's what makes this powerful. Restlessness is the beginning of loss of control. When an avoidant feels restless, they can't sit comfortably in their usual distance. They check your socials more often. They replay old conversations in their head. They find themselves scrolling through your pictures not to reminisce, but to understand, to figure out, why haven't they cracked yet? Did something change? Are they seeing someone else? Did I miscalculate? Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And this is exactly where they suffer first, in imagination. Your silence gives their mind no data. And where there's no data, imagination rushes in. Their brain fills the void with possibilities, some flattering to you, some terrifying to them. And every possibility makes them more restless. Now, let's talk about you, because this is where most people sabotage themselves. When they sense that restlessness, when the avoidant starts orbiting, breadcrumbing, throwing little signs, it's tempting to break. To throw them a bone, send the text, restart the loop. You feel that flicker of, they're thinking of me, I should reach out. But that's the trap. That's you stepping back into their script. Understand this. Restlessness is progress. It means silence is working. It means they're not in control anymore. You are. Don't interrupt it. Don't rescue them from it. Because the longer they sit in restlessness, the more cracks form in their armor. Think of it like this. Your silence is not punishment. It's pressure. Pressure creates movement. Pressure creates cracks. Pressure forces what's buried underneath to rise. And here's the truth. Restlessness always comes before revelation. You can't get to the deeper emotions, the regret, the longing, the fear of loss, until they go through this restless confusion first. So let them squirm. Let them pace. Let them wear down their thumbs, refreshing your profile, waiting for you to crack. Because every moment they feel that restlessness, the old cycle is dying. And you're doing the hardest thing a person can do in this dynamic. Nothing. But understand that nothing is not passive. It's deliberate. It's the most active choice you can make. It's you saying, I'm no longer predictable. I'm no longer orbiting your avoidance. I'm no longer part of your script. Marcus Aurelius said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's what silence teaches you. It revokes the power you once gave them. And it shows them something even scarier. That maybe, just maybe, they never had as much control over you as they thought. So, thing number one, the first thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is confusion mutating into restlessness. It's the unease of their old script failing. It's the beginning of cracks forming in the wall they hide behind. And that's just the start. Thing number two, their ego starts to crumble. After restlessness comes something even more unsettling for the avoidant, their ego starts to crack. Understand this. Avoidants build their entire identity on control. Their distance, their aloofness, their "I don't need you" act. It's not just a behavior, it's armor. Armor that keeps them safe from intimacy, safe from rejection, safe from feeling small. And up until now, their ego has always had the upper hand. Why? Because they've always been able to predict you. They know that if they ignore your text, you'll send another. If they pull back, you'll lean in. If they disappear, you'll chase. Every move you made validated the story in their head. I'm the one with power. I decide how close or far this relationship goes. But your silence is like a crack in that armor. At first it's small, barely noticeable, but the longer it goes, the more it spreads. And with every day you don't break, every night you don't reach out, their ego loses ground. Now, here's the twist. When I say ego, I'm not just talking about arrogance. Ego is their survival mechanism. It's the voice that whispers, "I'm fine without them, I don't need anyone, I'm untouchable." But silence longer than they expected forces them to confront a truth they don't like. Maybe they're not as untouchable as they think. And that realization, it terrifies them. Picture it. They're scrolling through their phone at 1 a.m. They've checked your socials, nothing new. They've replayed old conversations in their head, still no answers. They're restless, yes, but now restlessness evolves into something sharper: insecurity, doubt. That fragile ego they protect with distance begins to wobble. And insecurity is poison to an avoidant self-image. Think about it. Their entire persona is built on seeming cool, detached, unbothered. But your silence puts a spotlight on the cracks. They start asking themselves questions they don't usually allow in. Why haven't they broken yet? Am I losing my grip here? What if they don't need me anymore? Do you realize how dangerous those questions are to their ego? Because once the ego starts to doubt itself, it collapses fast. There's a psychological principle here called narcissistic injury, the blow someone feels when their self-image is threatened. Now, not every avoidant is a narcissist, but make no mistake, their ego reacts the same way. Your silence is a mirror they can't avoid, and what they see in that mirror is weakness. Not yours, theirs. And here's what makes this beautiful. You don't have to lift a finger. You're not begging, you're not proving, you're not explaining, you're doing nothing, but that nothing is forcing them to confront everything. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when their ego starts crumbling, their thoughts turn darker. They can't lean on the comfort of, "They'll always come back." Instead, they start painting pictures of what it means if you don't. Pictures of you moving on, of you no longer caring, of you living a life where they're irrelevant. And every one of those thoughts chips away at the pride they've been hiding behind. Here's the irony. Avoidants run from intimacy because they fear rejection, but silence makes them taste the very thing they were trying to avoid. They feel rejection, not because you said a word, but because your lack of words speaks louder than any plea ever could. And you? You're finally watching the balance of power shift. But this is where you have to be strong, because when their ego starts to crumble, they'll test you. They might breadcrumb, send a vague message like a "hey" out of nowhere, just to see if you'll bite. They might watch your stories more, just to signal they're still lurking. Or they might post something indirect, a song lyric, a selfie, anything to bait you into breaking the silence. Do not fall for it, because the moment you break, their ego rebuilds. The armor reseals, the script resets, and you're back at square one. You've got to understand, this is where most people fail. They mistake ego cracks for a breakthrough. They think, they're finally reaching out, I've won. But no, you haven't. Not yet. Their ego is wounded, but it's not shattered. And until it's shattered, until they've sat in that insecurity long enough to face their own reflection, the cycle isn't broken. Seneca said, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." For the avoidant, prosperity was the comfort of your predictable chase. Your silence removes that prosperity, and the misfortune they feel, that's their ego crumbling under the weight of its own lies. So thing number 2, the second thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is the collapse of their ego. The armor they've been hiding behind starts to crack. The cool, distant persona they've been projecting starts to shake, and deep down they feel something they've avoided for years: vulnerability. And here's the powerful part. Once their ego crumbles, they're no longer in control of the story. For the first time, you are. Thing number 3, the fear of replacement creeps in. By the time your silence stretches beyond their expectations and their ego has taken a few blows, a darker feeling begins to emerge inside the avoidant. Fear. Not just fear of losing control, not just fear of being wrong, but the fear of being replaced. Understand this: avoidants thrive on the illusion of permanence. They want to believe that no matter how far they run, no matter how long they withdraw, you'll always be there. Orbiting, waiting, available. You were their safety net. You were their backup plan, their emotional charger. They convinced themselves, even if I push them away, they'll come back. But when your silence drags on longer than they can justify, that illusion shatters, and now they start asking the questions that strike directly at their deepest insecurity. What if they've moved on? What if someone else has their attention now? What if I'm not as irreplaceable as I thought? That fear doesn't hit all at once. At first, it sneaks in during quiet moments. They scroll through social media and wonder why your story isn't about them anymore. They notice you haven't liked their posts the way you used to. They see you smiling in a photo, maybe out with friends, and the thought creeps in, wait, who took that picture? Who's making them laugh like that? This is where silence becomes a weapon more powerful than any argument, because silence leaves space, and space invites imagination, and imagination is the birthplace of fear. Psychologists call this object permanence anxiety in adult relationships. It's the same principle babies experience when a toy is hidden. They panic because they can't see it, so they assume it's gone forever. For avoidance, when you disappear from their radar, their brain starts telling the story. Maybe I've lost them, maybe they're with someone else. And that thought terrifies them, not because they suddenly want intimacy, but because the one thing they thought they had, control over your availability, is slipping through their fingers. Now let's get brutally real. Avoidants do not imagine you sitting alone, patiently waiting for them. They imagine you being pursued, desired, enjoyed. They imagine someone else giving you what they were too afraid to. And that fear of replacement, it eats at them. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." The avoidant, in this stage, feels that poverty. They crave the reassurance that you're still theirs, that you're still available, that they're still the center of your orbit. But your silence starves them of that reassurance, and so their craving grows into fear. Here's where things get interesting. Fear of replacement often triggers behaviors they swore they'd never show. Suddenly they're watching your stories more often. They might accidentally like an old picture. They might send a casual breadcrumb message, "Hey," or "How have you been?" Not out of genuine curiosity, but to test the waters, to see if they still matter. And if they don't see evidence of your loyalty, that fear intensifies. They start running scenarios in their mind. Are they on a date right now? What if they've stopped thinking about me completely? What if I was just a chapter, and now they've moved on to someone better? Notice something important here. Silence flips the script. For so long you were the one haunted by those questions. Are they thinking of me? Do I still matter? Have I been replaced? But now the roles reverse. They're the ones asking. They're the ones haunted. And that shift is monumental. But here's the catch. This is exactly where many people break their silence. They sense the avoidance fear. They see them orbiting. They feel the pull. And they mistake it for genuine change. They think, this is my chance to prove myself, to show I'm still here. Don't do it. Because fear of replacement is not the same as love. Fear of replacement is ego in panic mode. It's their pride screaming, don't you dare move on without me. But that's not intimacy. That's possession. That's not a healthy bond. That's fear disguised as interest. Marcus Aurelius said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And right now what they feel isn't truth. It's not love. It's not a deep, secure desire for you. It's fear of losing their place in your life. And until they confront that fear head-on, until they learn how to replace it with genuine vulnerability, it means nothing. So you must hold the line. Your silence has brought them here, and your silence must keep them here. Let them feel it. Let them wrestle with it. Let them taste the fear of being replaced, because only then can they face the truth they've been avoiding, that people are not infinite backup plans, that you are not infinite validation, that they are not untouchable. So, thing number 3, the third thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is fear of replacement. That creeping insecurity that whispers, maybe they've moved on, maybe someone else has what I threw away. And that fear, it shakes them to their core. Thing number 4, the first seeds of regret take root. This is the stage avoidants fear the most, and yet it's unavoidable. See, up until now, they've been able to rationalize their feelings. Restlessness. They can blame it on boredom, ego cracks. They can patch them with pride, fear of replacement. They can tell themselves, I'm still better off alone. But when your silence stretches on, longer than their justifications, longer than their defenses, longer than their excuses, something breaks. And for the first time, regret seeps in. Not the loud, dramatic kind of regret where they call you crying and confess everything. No, that comes later, if at all. At this stage, regret starts small, subtle, quiet. It creeps in like a whisper in the back of their mind. Did I make a mistake? Was pushing them away really worth it? Why did I throw that away so easily? And here's the beauty of silence. You don't have to say a word for those questions to echo, because avoidants hate sitting in silence with their own thoughts. They've been running from them their whole life. That's why they stay busy. That's why they chase distractions. That's why they bury themselves in work, in hobbies, in shallow connections, anything to avoid the weight of real feelings, but silence strips all that away. Silence is the one thing they can't outrun, and in that silence, regret begins to take root. It shows up in flashes. They remember that laugh you had in the car, that time you supported them when no one else did, the way you used to show up for them, consistently, loyally, even when they didn't deserve it. And the truth hits them. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a presence. Because here's what avoidants don't realize until it's gone. Presence is rare. Loyalty is rare. Real unconditional support is rare. And your silence shines a spotlight on that rarity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." When an avoidant feels regret, they are forced to confront mortality in a small but powerful way. They realize that time is moving, life is moving, and you are moving, with or without them, and the possibility that they've wasted something precious. That's what regret feels like. Now let's get brutally clear. Regret at this stage is not about love. Not yet. It's about loss. It's about scarcity. It's about them realizing they may have miscalculated. But even if it isn't love, it's still powerful, because regret plants a seed, and seeds grow. Here's how it plays out. They start scrolling through old photos, rereading old messages, not because they want to relive the good times, but because they're trying to confirm something. Did I throw away something that actually mattered? And every memory they revisit, every moment they replay, strengthens the seed of regret. Psychologists call this counterfactual thinking, the mental process of replaying what-if scenarios. What if I had stayed? What if I hadn't pulled away? What if I hadn't pushed them so hard? And every what-if makes silence louder, heavier, harder to bear. And here's the paradox. The more regret they feel, the less likely they are to admit it. Avoidants are allergic to vulnerability, so instead of confessing, they act out, they distract. They try to soothe their regret by proving to themselves that they're still in control. Maybe they post something calculated, a picture to spark your curiosity. Maybe they flirt with someone else, not out of desire, but out of desperation, to drown out the regret echoing in their chest. Maybe they even badmouth you to friends, trying to convince themselves they're better off. But beneath all that noise, regret keeps growing. Seneca said, "How much better to pursue a straight course and attain a goal where the words, 'I was mistaken,' bring you more joy than the words, 'I was right.'" And that's the turning point of regret. It softens them. It forces them, for once, to admit they may have been mistaken. And even if they never say it aloud, they feel it, deeply. Now here's the critical part for you. When you sense regret, don't break. Don't jump in to comfort them. Don't relieve their tension, because regret is exactly what they need to feel. Think about it. If you rescue them from regret, if you soothe them before the seed can grow, you rob them of the very lesson they need to learn. You let them dodge accountability again. You let them recycle the same pattern, run, hide, come back, repeat. No, let them feel it. Let them stew in it. Let them wrestle with it. Because regret is the only emotion heavy enough to drag an avoidant out of their comfort zone. So thing number 4, the fourth thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is regret. The first seeds of it. Quiet, creeping, undeniable. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, they threw away something that wasn't so easy to replace. And once regret takes root, it doesn't go away. It grows, it lingers, it haunts, and it's only the beginning of what's still to come. Thing number 5. They feel the loss of control. This is the stage where the game completely changes. Because for an avoidant, control isn't just important, it's oxygen. It's the thing that makes them feel safe. It's the reason they keep people at arm's length, the reason they disappear when things get too close, the reason they keep their emotions hidden behind cold detachment. Control protects them from chaos. Control protects them from intimacy. Control protects them from feeling powerless. But when you stay silent longer than they expected, that control starts slipping right through their hands. And for someone who's built their identity on staying in charge of the emotional dynamic, that loss of control feels like death. Here's why. In their head, the script was simple. They pull away, you chase. They disappear, you wait. They breadcrumb, you respond. It's predictable, safe, familiar. But your silence, it destroys the script. Suddenly the avoidant is no longer the director of the story. They're a character in your story, and they don't know what scene comes next. That's terrifying for them. Psychologists call this control deprivation. Humans naturally panic when the patterns they rely on are disrupted. It's why gamblers keep pulling slot machine levers. It's why people cling to routines. Predictability equals safety, but when you stay silent, you strip away predictability, and with it, their illusion of control. And this is where the anxiety hits. Not the low-level restlessness of thing number one, not the bruised ego of thing number two, not even the insecurity of thing number three. This is full-blown, stomach-tightening, chest-aching anxiety. They start obsessing. Why aren't they reacting? What are they doing right now? What if I can't get them back? That last question, that's the dagger, because in their mind they always believed they had an in, that no matter what they could reel you back. But silence erases that certainty, and without certainty their control slips, and avoidants don't do well when they're not in control. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But for the avoidant, that's the one lesson they've never mastered. Instead of controlling their mind, they try to control people. They try to control distance. They try to control timing. But now, your silence forces them to confront the reality. They can't control you, not anymore. And that realization shakes them to their core. You might notice signs. They may suddenly resurface with mixed signals, a random like, a vague text, a half-hearted attempt at contact. But that's not confidence. That's desperation disguised as casualness. It's them trying to claw back the control they've lost. Here's the irony. The more they try to regain control, the less control they actually have, because you're no longer playing by their rules. You're not responding the way you used to. You're not dancing to their rhythm anymore. And that unpredictability, it keeps them off balance. It's like a chess game. For years they've been the one dictating the moves. But now you've flipped the board. You're not even playing the same game, and they're left scrambling, trying to figure out rules they never learned. And this is where the avoidant feels something they've worked their whole life to avoid: vulnerability. Because without control, they have to face the truth, that maybe, just maybe, you're stronger than they are. Seneca once said, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." And that's exactly what happens here. The avoidant suffers in anticipation. They fear losing you before you've even said you're gone. They panic over losing control before you've even declared independence. Their mind exaggerates, catastrophizes, spirals, and all because silence has stripped them of the one thing they thought they had: power. Now here's the part you need to understand. This loss of control is necessary. It's uncomfortable for them, but it's transformative for you, because when they feel this shift, the balance of power tilts in your direction. For the first time, they're reacting to you, they're orbiting you, they're thinking about you, but you must not break here. This is where most people get pulled back into the cycle. They sense the avoidance panic, they see the cracks, and they think, "This is my chance, I should respond." No, not yet. Because if you give them control back too soon, they'll rebuild their armor, and the whole cycle repeats. Let them feel powerless. Let them wrestle with it. Let them sit in the discomfort of realizing they can't dictate your moves anymore, because only then will they begin to truly confront themselves. So, thing number 5, the fifth thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is the loss of control. The unraveling of the illusion that they were the one in charge, the panic that comes when they realize you're not waiting at the door, you're not dancing to their tune, you're not theirs to command. And that loss of control, it doesn't just sting, it terrifies them. Thing number 6, the crushing weight of emptiness. This is the stage most avoidants will never admit to anyone, not even themselves. Because when silence drags on, beyond confusion, beyond fear, beyond regret, what finally creeps in is emptiness. A hollow ache that no distraction, no rebound, no casual fling can truly fill. Understand this. Avoidants have spent their whole life trying to outrun this feeling. That's why they keep things surface level. That's why they sabotage intimacy. That's why they run when things get too real. Because beneath the avoidance, beneath the ego, beneath the control, there's a quiet truth they can't face. They are terrified of being alone with themselves. Your silence forces them into that confrontation. At first, it doesn't look like emptiness. It looks like boredom. They scroll aimlessly. They binge shows. They go out with friends. They even flirt with new people. But the more they try to fill the void, the louder the void gets. Because none of it feels the same. None of it gives them what they lost when they lost you. And here's the brutal irony. Avoidants crave independence. But when they actually get it, when silence makes it real, they don't feel free. They feel hollow. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And when your silence leaves them alone with their thoughts, they don't find happiness. They find emptiness. Because here's what they realize in the quiet. You weren't just another person. You were presence. You were comfort. You were a constant. And silence makes them taste life without that presence. And it feels empty. Psychologists call this withdrawal anxiety. It's the same phenomenon people experience when addicted to a substance. Once the hit is gone, the void it leaves behind feels unbearable. And that's what's happening here. Your presence was their hit. Your consistency was their drug. And now that you're gone, silence feels like withdrawal. And withdrawal doesn't just hurt. It terrifies. They find themselves staring at the ceiling at night, restless but exhausted. They check their phone not to see your name, but to confirm that your name isn't there. And every time it isn't, the emptiness grows heavier. This is where the games stop being fun. This is where distraction stops working. This is where the "I don't care" act collapses. Because here's the truth, emptiness doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter the ego. It doesn't let them pretend they're fine. Emptiness just sits there, heavy, undeniable. And for avoidance, that's torture. Because the very thing they've been running from their entire life, that inner void, is now unavoidable. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And that's the regret that fuels emptiness, wasted time, time they can't get back, time they spent pushing away the very thing they now miss in silence. But here's where you must be careful, because when emptiness sets in, avoidants often panic. They'll try anything to numb it. They might reach out to you, not out of love, but out of desperation to quiet the void. They might throw themselves into work. They might dive into shallow flings, chasing validation to prove they're still desirable. But nothing fills it. Because emptiness isn't about you anymore. It's about them. It's about the wounds they've ignored for years, the loneliness they've carried like a shadow. And silence forces them to feel it without escape. And here's the powerful part. You don't have to do a thing. Your silence is the mirror. Your silence is the teacher. Your silence is the weight pressing down until they finally confront the emptiness they've been hiding from. And you need to resist the urge to rescue them. Don't mistake their panic for genuine intimacy. Don't confuse their desperation for true connection. Because until they face their emptiness, until they learn to sit with it instead of running from it, they cannot meet you in a healthy way. This stage is brutal, for them, and sometimes for you. Because you may feel tempted to ease their suffering, to answer the breadcrumb, to break the silence. But if you do, you interrupt the very process that can transform them. So let them sit with it. Let them feel the hollow ache. Let them wrestle with the silence that makes them confront themselves. Because thing number 6, the 6th thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected, is emptiness. A gnawing hollowness that no distraction can soothe, no ego can cover, no control can rebuild. And that emptiness, it doesn't just sting, it crushes. Thing number 7. They realize you're no longer the same person they left behind. This is the breaking point. By now, silence has stripped away their comfort, shredded their ego, exposed their fears, and left them face to face with emptiness. But when silence drags on even further, something deeper happens, something that rattles them to their core. They begin to realize that the person they left behind doesn't exist anymore. This is the moment avoidants dread. Because up until now, every part of their pattern has depended on one thing: predictability. The belief that you would always respond the same way, play the same role, show up in the same form, that no matter how many times they pushed you away, you'd be there, unchanged, waiting, available. But when your silence lasts longer than their defenses, they're forced to confront a brutal truth. You're evolving. You're not the same. You're changing in ways they can't control, can't predict, can't stop. And that realization terrifies them. Because here's what it means: their old power over you is gone. The buttons they used to push, they don't work anymore. The cycle they used to run, it's broken. The person who once folded under the weight of their distance is no longer here. In psychological terms, this is called schema disruption. They had a fixed schema, a mental model of who you were and how you'd behave. But silence breaks it, and when a schema breaks, the brain scrambles to adjust. For an avoidant, that scramble feels like panic. They start asking the hardest questions. Have they outgrown me? What if they don't even want me anymore? What if I was just a chapter in their story, and now the story has moved on? And here's the kicker. This is the first time the avoidant actually begins to see you clearly. Not as the anxious chaser, not as the predictable fallback, not as the safe option they could always return to, but as an independent, evolving person who may no longer choose them. That's when silence transforms from annoying absence into existential threat. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Your silence is proof that you've realized this. You've reclaimed power over your own mind, and now they feel powerless because they can't control outside events, especially you. And this shift, it's devastating to them. See, avoidants are haunted by one core fear: being unworthy of love. That's why they avoid intimacy, because if they never let anyone get close enough, they never have to face the possibility of being rejected. But your silence does what nothing else could. It makes them feel rejected without you saying a word. That's why thing number 7 is the most powerful stage. It's the point where they stop thinking about whether you'll come back and start realizing you may already be gone, that the door may not even be open anymore, that you're no longer the same person who would have answered it anyway. And that terrifies them more than anything. Here's what it looks like. They might spiral into self-reflection, replaying every choice they made, every chance they wasted. They might reach out in desperation, saying things they swore they'd never say. Or they might go silent themselves, paralyzed by the fear of confirming what they already know, that they've lost their grip on you. Psychologists call this stage identity threat. When someone's core sense of who they are gets shaken. For the avoidant, their identity has always been built on distance, on control, on keeping others at bay. But your silence proves something terrifying. Distance doesn't protect them anymore. It exposes them. And that's why thing number 7 isn't just about what they feel. It's about who they become. Because in this stage they face a choice: evolve or stay stuck. Step into vulnerability or retreat into denial. Some will retreat. Some will hide. Some will double down on old patterns. But others, the ones truly shaken, may finally begin to grow. But here's what you must know. None of this happens if you break silence too soon. If you return before they reach this stage, you rob them of the most powerful revelation they could ever experience. The realization that you are no longer the same person they left behind. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Your silence is their difficulty. Your absence is their labor. And whether they learn from it or not, it changes them. Forever. So thing number 7. The seventh thing an avoidant feels when you stay silent longer than they expected is the gut-punch realization that you've evolved, that you're no longer the predictable fallback, that you've stepped into your own power, and they can't follow unless they transform too. And for them, that's not just painful, that's terrifying. By the time silence has dragged them through confusion, ego collapse, fear, regret, loss of control, emptiness, and the shocking realization that you've changed, something deeper begins to stir. For the first time in maybe their entire life, the avoidant is forced to confront the real enemy, themselves. See, until now, every stage has been about you in their mind. They've obsessed about your silence, your potential replacement, your evolution. But at this stage, the silence lasts so long that the mirror flips, and what they see staring back isn't you, it's them. And that terrifies them even more, because avoidants spend their entire lives building walls to avoid this exact moment. They run from intimacy, not because they don't crave connection, but because connection exposes patterns they've been hiding from, their childhood wounds, their fears of abandonment, their belief that closeness equals danger. But silence leaves no hiding place. They start asking questions they've avoided for years. Why do I always push people away? Why do I sabotage every good thing that comes into my life? Why do I keep repeating this cycle over and over? That is the power of silence. It forces accountability. It makes them see that the common denominator in all their failed connections isn't the partners they left behind. It's them. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look." But for the avoidant, looking within has always been the hardest thing, because to look within means to admit weakness, to admit pain, to admit that maybe, just maybe, the reason they keep losing good people isn't because those people were too much, but because they were too afraid. And here's the paradox. Silence is brutal, but it's also compassionate, because it gives them space to finally stop projecting and start reflecting. This stage often looks like withdrawal. They may pull away from everyone, not just you. They may spend nights alone, journaling, thinking, replaying memories they tried to bury. They may even start reading self-help or watching videos like this one, not because they suddenly get it, but because they can no longer escape the fact that something inside them is broken. And here's where the shift happens. For the first time, the avoidant begins to realize that the silence you've given them is not punishment. It's a mirror that shows them the wreckage of their patterns, a mirror that forces them to admit, this isn't about them, this is about me. And that is the beginning of transformation. Now, let's be clear, not every avoidant will transform. Some will double down. Some will run to the next distraction, the next surface-level fling, the next quick fix. They'll bury the mirror again and pretend nothing happened. But the ones who are truly shaken, they'll start the work. They'll begin to realize that the cycle they've been running their whole life isn't sustainable, that silence has stripped away their excuses, that the pattern ends not when someone saves them, but when they face themselves. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance." And that's exactly what silence reveals. Wisdom doesn't come from escape. It comes from facing the patterns that keep you trapped. And for the avoidant, thing number 8 is where that battle finally begins. They may not tell you, they may never admit it, but inside, the war is raging, and whether they win that war or not isn't up to you anymore, because silence has done its job. Silence has handed them the mirror. What they choose to do with it, that's their journey. If you're still here right now, still listening, still absorbing, still invested, let me pause and say something most people won't. I respect you. Do you know how rare it is for someone to sit through the entire journey without skipping, without scrolling, without clicking away for some cheap dopamine hit? Most people don't make it. Most people aren't willing to sit in the discomfort long enough to grow. But you did. And that tells me one thing. You're ready. Ready to stop chasing people who run from themselves. Ready to stop bleeding out your energy for someone who couldn't handle it. Ready to claim the power that's been yours this entire time. Think about what we've uncovered together in this video. We started with their confusion, the cracks forming in their perfect little script. Then we walked through their ego crumbling, their fear of being replaced, the first pangs of regret, the collapse of control, the crushing emptiness, and finally, the truth that shook them to their core, that you're no longer the same person they left behind. That is a transformation you created with nothing but silence. Let that sink in. You didn't have to beg. You didn't have to chase. You didn't have to sell yourself or prove your worth. You simply held your ground, and in doing so, you flipped the power dynamic completely. That's not weakness. That's not passivity. That's mastery. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what you've done by holding silence. You stopped trying to control the uncontrollable, their behavior, their avoidance, their distance, and you took control of the one thing you always had, yourself. And here's the truth, most people will never understand. Silence isn't just about making them feel something. It's about making you realize something, that you were never powerless, that you were never small, that the person you've been waiting for to come save you has been looking back in the mirror this whole time. Because let's be brutally honest, your avoidant ex isn't the story. They're just the trigger. The real story is you, and the transformation that happens when you stop giving your power away. And I know it's hard. Silence feels heavy. It feels lonely. It feels like nothing's happening. But as you've seen, silence is never nothing. It is the loudest teacher. It is the mirror that exposes everything, in them and in you. Now here's what I want you to do before you leave this video. Type this in the comments. It's the secret mantra I told you I'd reveal here at the end. Silence made me stronger. That's it. 4 words. But those 4 words are the line in the sand. They're the declaration that you've stopped begging, stopped chasing, stopped folding, that you've turned silence from something painful into something powerful. And here's the deal. The first person who comments that mantra, I'm going to pin you at the top of this video. Not because it's a gimmick, but because it deserves to be seen. Because in a world where most people never finish what they start, you finished, you committed, you chose growth. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I promise you, what's coming next on this channel isn't just going to help you survive heartbreak. It's going to help you master relationships, master discipline, master life itself. Because here's what I believe, heartbreak isn't the end, it's the training ground. The fire you walk through that forges you into someone unshakable, and silence. Silence is one of the sharpest weapons you'll ever carry in that fire. So don't let this be the last time you invest in yourself. Keep showing up, keep committing, keep choosing your evolution over their avoidance. Seneca once said, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." Your story is not defined by who walked away. It's defined by what you do now, by how you rise, by how you rebuild. So walk away from this video knowing one thing. Silence was never about punishing them. It was about discovering you, your strength, your worth, your freedom. And that's something no avoidant, no ex, no past mistake can ever take away. So type the mantra in the comments, silence made me stronger. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. This is your edge, your reset, your rebirth. Now go live like it.